Good afternoon, everybody. Is everybody having fun? Can you hear this? Can you hear this? Can you hear it okay? Good. Well, you're in for a treat. Our next speaker is Dr. Rita Louise. She's an author and soul healer. She's an MD and a PhD who represents the leading edge of holistic health and mind-body healing. She's recognized by the National Register's Who's Who. And Dr. Louise is a naturopath, medical intuitive, herbalist, and spiritual counselor. And she's here to talk to us today about medical intuition, insights into health and wellness. Please help me welcome Dr. Rita Louise.
Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for coming. The last expo they had, or a couple before it, the person before me you couldn't hear, and they said the microphone was busted, so I started talking really loud, but apparently the microphone really wasn't broken. And so I'm just figuring that everyone can hear me because I can usually fill the room with sound with or without a microphone. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about medical intuition, and I'm going to try to make it so that we have plenty of time to get for you all to ask questions. And so I'm just going to kind of whip through some introductory material and then just really open it up to the floor. So I had my first medical intuitive experience when I was about 21. I was working at a company as a drafter, and the way that the office was set up, I was in this bullpen area, and the room next door was this media lab. And there was the manager of the lab, who was about 45, and he seemed really old at the time, and his assistant, who was my age, and he and I would just kind of, do things that you do when you're 20 and 21, and you don't have anything to do. So we would like push each other up and down the hall in chairs and stuff. We just kept busy. And so every day we would go and get a soda, and I would go and get this guy a soda, and that was pretty much our relationship. I said hi, and 3 o'clock would come, and I'd say, well, do you want a soda? And he'd say yeah, so he'd give me his money, and I'd go get him a soda, and that was it. And so one day he didn't come into work, which was very strange for him. And so the following day I, did my regular go in, say good morning, and, he was back, and I walked over to him, and he was kind of balding, and he had a little round Band-Aid on the top of his head. And so, my cognitive brain said, oh, he must have a zit, and it's probably pussy and red, and he put the Band-Aid up there because it was one of those skin tone kind. Maybe you won't notice it. And I walked up to him and said, well, where were you yesterday, having them check for a brain tumor? And his face turned white, and he turned around and walked out of the room. Now, I'm standing there, and every hair on my body was on end, and I was shaking inside, and I didn't really get what was going on. So I went back to my desk, and the assistant comes running into my office screaming at me, he thinks I told. And I just looked at him and told me what? And he goes, that's where he was yesterday, having them check for a brain tumor. And I was like, ow. So my life has been filled with a lot of these coincidences, and it wasn't until many years later that I studied at the Berkeley Psychic Institute and found out that I had been having psychic experiences my entire life. And I mean, if you think about it, a medical intuitive is a psychic person, and I feel very comfortable saying that in this group, is a psychic person that talks to you about health. And so let's talk about what medical intuition is. Medical intuition is an evaluative tool. And so when you work with someone that's a medical intuitive, their goal is to sit there and assess what's going on in your body. So it's like going to the doctor and having blood work done or getting an MRI. Those tests are assessing what's going on in your body. And then, so if you go and have like an x-ray done, the radiologist, their job is to take the picture. Their job is not to sit there and do the evaluation. And so when you work with a medical intuitive, in the very strictest sense of the word, their job is to sit there and say, this is what I see going on. This is what I see going on. And so as an example, I had 2 women. It's like, when you work with people, you have cycles of things. So like this past week, I had a cycle of bloating issues, which I didn't really get. But I had these 2 women that both were suffering from burning urination. And so they went the regular course, went to the doctor, had tests done. They really weren't finding anything. And so, of course, they went home with antibiotics. One woman had been on 3 courses of antibiotics that had extended for 3 months. And as she would be on the antibiotics, the symptoms got better, but then she would stop the antibiotics and they would just reappear. But even while she was on them, they didn't really stop. They just didn't really stop. And she was like ready to go out of the country, get a second opinion. I mean, she had really put a lot of effort. I mean, she had just recently got married, wanted to have children. She couldn't have sex because it hurt too much. I mean, it was just this big issue in her life. And so she called me up, and I'm doing a session with her, and I said, well, it's not bacterial. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, it's not bacterial. I go, it's something else. I'm not a medical doctor. I said, but I'm telling you, it's not bacterial. Yes, they can test for it. You need to have them test for something else that you can get there. One woman had protozoa, so it was and I hate even to say this because it's a little embarrassing, it is a form of chlamydia, which is a protozoal growth that she had in her urinary tract. The other one had E. coli. And so the one that had the protozoal growth, they just gave her this medication and it went away in a week after being on antibiotics for 3 months. And so I've had a number of clients that have come, doctors don't know what's going on, and I, kind of joke around and tell people I have X-ray vision because I just look in people's body and go, oh, well, you busted that bone, hysterectomy or cesarean, scoliosis. I mean, it kind of doesn't matter. So that's one aspect. That's the very physical component of medical intuition, which is an invaluable tool. I just had a lady this week, and she goes, this is much nicer than going to the doctor. You didn't, poke me, and, you don't take your clothes off, and you don't have to do anything embarrassing because you just sit in the chair and, and I just talk, which is good for me because I once had a lady who had, I don't even know what going on, and she was like, well, do you want to see it? I'm like, no. Keep your clothes on. I just don't even want to look. One of the things that I love about medical intuition, however, is that it will always, or not always, in most cases, there is a psychospiritual component to an illness. In most cases. And when you're doing work as a medical intuitive, you can usually identify what that is. And so when I sit there and talk about disease, I kind of classify them into 3 or 4 major groups. I mean, if you have an accident, if you fall and you break your leg or you get into a car accident, it's an accident. Now, there are the people that will sit there and talk about, well, but spiritually you needed to have that accident because But from a physical point of view and from what's going on inside your body, it's kind of in a different category. And so when I consider an accident, it's like if you break your leg is broken. There's really not anything psychospiritual about how your leg broke. The other one is viral or environmental, I guess would be the better way to say it. So you get a bug. Something like AIDS, there's a very big emotional component to it growing, but the initial contact is something environmental. And then the other category that I always talk about is which is the biggest one, are the ones that there are always psychospiritual components to. And so things like arthritis, things like cancer, things like diabetes. Yes, there can be a physical component, and there is a physical component, but there's always a psychospiritual thought or emotion that's tied to the health issue. Let me give you an example. I had a client who had been diagnosed with juvenile diabetes. He was about 8 or 9 years old when they had, identified that he had diabetes. And I was sitting there and we were working, and I made a comment to him. I go, well, there's a lot of issues about your mom. And he's like, no, not my mom, it's my dad. And I said, I'm sorry, but your dad's not sitting there, it's your mom. He's like, no. And so I sat there and I said, well, I have a question for you. I go, was your mom all sugar and spice? And he goes, well, I was really skinny when I was young, and they would constantly feed me milkshakes and, things to put weight on. He goes, is that what you mean? And I said, well, I think that's a component of it. I go, but personality-wise, was your mom all sugar and spice? And he said, yeah. So if I say chakras, is there anybody that's not going to know what that word means? Okay. So if you think about it on a third chakra level, which is our power center, which sits here, the third chakra controls the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, the spleen, the kidneys, and the adrenals. I mean, they're all controlled by that energy center. His mother tried to, and I use the word tried, to control him using her sugar and spice. And so energetically, what he was doing was protecting himself from her control, because the third chakra is about power. It's about control. And so if you don't use your power, you tend to let other people control you. If you use your power, you tend to either own your space and have very clear boundaries, or you might be a controller. And so he used his third chakra energy to stop his mother from controlling him by her sugar and spice. Does that make sense? Then it turned out, after in another session where I was doing some energy work on him, it was very interesting, because I'm sitting there and I'm working on his pancreas and doing all this stuff, and I just started feeling like I wanted to vomit, and I'm just doing this. And I said, okay, well, what's with this throwing up thing? And he goes, and I go, kind of tied to that 8-year-old situation. And he goes, well, I remember one time when I was, 8 or whatever, that, they were still feeding me them milkshakes and stuff. And I got really sick and I threw up. And I looked at him, I said, that's what triggered it all. Because they were forcing the milkshakes on him. He got sick. That sat there and triggered the physical part. And and a year later he was diagnosed with diabetes. Any questions so far?
And so then what, are you able to help him with his diabetes now that you've identified the psychospiritual?
Well, see, and this is what I was talking about initially. Medical intuition is an evaluative tool. And so from a very technical, and I'm being very technical, their role is not to fix it. Okay, now I'm a naturopath and I've been studying this stuff for forever. When I first started doing energy work, I was always finding people's health problems. I mean, it was just, I just wanted to be Rita the psychic chick, and I just want to talk about people's relationships, because I kind of am a little catty and will gossip about people, and I thought that would be really fun, because it's like, you come to me and we're going to talk about your boyfriend who sucks, and we're just going to have this conversation. And I thought that's what I was going to do when I grew up. And, after I figured out that I was psychic. But people would come to me and I was always finding their health problems. And so the first question that people would ask is, what can I do about it? That was always the first question. And that led me personally to go back to school to get information so that I could help them. But when working, and this is, one of the things I say, is like when looking and working with someone that is a medical intuitive, and I'm going to put that in quotations, it's like you really do need to look, if you're looking to get advice from them and, what you can do to get well, what their level of experience is. I mean, because you might get the information, but there might not be the background to support their recommendations. Just a little word of advice. Did that answer your question? Kind of not really. I mean, a lot of people come to me personally because they want the assessment. They don't necessarily want me to fix it.
I guess really even by identifying the cause of your diabetes, and I guess it's not like psychotherapy where you work through it and you're cured. Because now you identify the cause of it, he maintains a relationship with his mother, it will go away.
Well, I mean, he did a lot of energy work. I mean, he was a very spiritually open chiropractor, and he had just hit an impasse. and was looking to figure out why he wasn't getting well. You know what I mean? So he had gotten about 45% function back in his pancreas through the work that he had been doing, but he had hit an impasse and couldn't figure out why he couldn't move forward. You know, and so usually when people come to a medical intuitive, it's like they're looking for that information. They're looking to understand why or what. You know, and that is what that is. I mean, because once you sit there and you move out of that, you're moving into wellness counseling. You know, and that's a whole different ballgame.
You can identify things and then you send them to a different area. They know where to go to help.
Well, not necessarily when you come see me, but this topic is about medical intuition. This topic isn't about what I do, per se. I mean, when people come to see me, you know, either I make recommendations about what you can do to get well, you know, whether it's nutritionally, whether it's energy work, whether it's go see a counselor, whether it's you need to do some forgiveness work, whether it's you need to go see a chiropractor. I mean, are there any chiropractors in here? Okay, we're going to talk about them a minute. You know, and not anyone in particular, but I'm sure all of you have seen practitioners where you go see them and, like, they can fix a broken leg, they can cure the common cold, you know, or there's a lot of products. It's like, oh, you know, I can fix your car. You know, this product can fix your car and clean out your arteries. You know, and when you work, I mean, for me at least, when I work with someone, I am going to direct them to an area that's going to be congruent with them. And it's not for them to come to me so that they just stay in my care. You know, so I do a lot of referring out, you know, because I don't do everything, you know, and I help them to what I can, but I'm just being in my integrity. So. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're back to the same question. Okay, let's see. How do I rephrase this? Medical intuition as a tool is an evaluative tool. It's like getting a test done. Okay, now there's what I do in my practice, which is medical intuition and energy work and wellness counseling and naturopathic work. Okay, and so the word I use for that is soul healing because it's sitting there looking at you from body, mind, and spirit. Medical intuition in and of itself is an evaluative tool. Did that answer your question?
Most of your clients come because they're like-minded and they seek you first, or is it better for?
I have both. I have some people that just hate doctors and will just come because they are an alternative person. But I also have a lot of people that come because they've been to the doctor. You know, I have to take like 3 painkillers so I can get out of bed, but I can't drive my car because I really don't even feel good enough to do that. And I have to have my girlfriend drive me to the doctor, and they run all these tests and say there's nothing wrong with you. I get a lot of that, you know, where they just don't have a clue. You know, and so usually I will sit there and send them in some direction. Like yesterday I had someone who they thought she maybe had arthritis, she maybe had MS, that she maybe had lupus, which I didn't pick up any of those 3 in her, but I did feel like there was something going on in her brain that maybe she had a stroke. You know, and not being a medical doctor, it's like you don't have the medical ease to sit there and throw back at people to say, you know, I'll just say, you need to have them test for something like this. You know, and so I redirected her to have them do more work in the brain area as if they were looking to see if she had a stroke, because that would be the genre that the answer would come up under.
Follow-up question. What about the people that have been to doctors, that see themselves as that kind of not as that kind of victim? Can you relay what that kind of is? Can you deal with that and cut through that and bring them into the energy of awareness of the possibility?
Sometimes. I mean, that's a very challenging person. One of, from a not medical intuitive point of view, but just from a alternative health practitioner point of view, compliance is a big issue. I have a lot of people that come in, and I had a woman who had irritable bowels. There was this chunk of her intestinal tract from like here to here that was just raw. And one of her issues was that she had bleeding diarrhea. And so I said, well, it would be a good idea, here's a supplement that will sit there and coat and soothe the intestinal tract. It'll make it start to heal, blah, blah, blah. I want you to get this product, take it, and then I want to see you in a month. And we're going to do some energy work to just kind of work on some of the emotional and then some deeper healing on it. She came back in a month and never bought the product. And so I kind of yelled at her. I don't do that very often, but I said, what's the point of coming to see me if you're not really going to participate in yourself getting well? And then I never saw her again because I guess I pissed her off, but oh well. But but that's the reality of it, and so people that are victims, it's like they're not interested in putting their energy into making themselves well. They just want you to fix it for them, and I can't go to their house every day and make them take a pill, or do imagery or do whatever. So, sometimes you can call them on it, and that might shift things, but it's really case by case. You've been very patient.
Are you recognized by insurance companies to give insurance?
No.
Do you ever refer from a primary physician?
No. They don't do psychic things. In the state of Texas, they barely even recognize naturopaths. We're just like, an uncomfortable group of people. Washington State actually recognizes naturopaths and acupuncturists, and that's pretty much the only state that I know that even goes that far. So, not Texas.
We have a relative that's a good part of the country. Can you do medical intuition over long distance by phone?
Mm-hmm. Nope. I have clients that I work with around the world, so I'm on the phone. I literally only come into my office maybe once or twice a week because most of my client base is not in the Dallas area. Doing it by phone is easy. Where I think it gets a little interesting is I do have some people that are international that don't really want to make the phone call, and I do email sessions. Now, that's weird to me because they'll just sit there and say, this is what I have going on, and I'll be like, oh, and I just write this whole thing back, and they're like, oh, that so makes sense. And I'm like, okay, because it was weird on my part. No. I don't even need that. I need a person's name. That's it. I've had a lot of clients where, let's say, you came in because she isn't feeling good. No, well, we're going to change that. You came in because he's not feeling good, but he isn't ever going to come see me. You know what I mean? Because he's a guy, and they never do. And and so I have a lot of clients that they'll come and we'll talk about their husbands, we'll talk about children. Especially if they're younger, where they really can't participate in the session. So infants, small children, parents, that as a child, they're very spiritually open. They really believe in medical intuition, but, their mom's 80 and there's no way she's coming into my office. I'll get a lot of that. And so I don't even need to be addressing or talking to the person that it's part of that gossip thing, that I'm working with. Because it's the same way if I'm sitting there talking to her about your guys' relationship, and well, you obviously are not there, but I'll just sit there and talk about you. So if I talk about your personality and whether you're a nice guy or not, I can talk about your health. I haven't quite figured out how that process works, but the feedback that I get, I mean, because really it's based on feedback that I get, is that it's usually pretty right on. So.
Do you have a 900 number?
Or 1-900 psychic chick. No. I mean, I take Visa or MasterCard. Just to let you know, I have a website, www.soulhealer.com. If you type Rita Louise into any search engine, you'll find me 3,000 in some odd gazillion different ways. So, actually, I figured out if you type, and this is really embarrassing, if you type Rita, Texas, TX, I come up like number 5. Well, my kids have that, like, blogging thing, and they'll sit there and be like, my stepkids, so, Rita, and I'm like, you really can't use my name on there. I go, because watch this, Rita, Texas, and I'm like, number 5. There was a question back somewhere. Excuse me? I'm pretty much in the middle of the exhibit area, and you kind of can't miss it. There's these big blue signs. You see my big head kind of floating around over everybody. How am I doing? Okay, one last question. Thank you for the plug. I have 2 books. I just happen to have them here. One is Avoiding the Cosmic 2x4. This got released last. It's a good book. Actually, I was recently, this is one of my little feel-good things, I was recently on Shirley MacLaine's radio show, and she read the book, and apparently she liked it enough that it's now available on her website, too. And I was like, woohoo! So that's available. And then This is The Power Within, which talks about, this is the brain food book, about how energy moves and flows through the body and why we get sick. And then if you want to learn energy medicine techniques to make yourself well, this is the doing book. Not a reading book, it's a doing book. Also, okay, so I mentioned my website. I am doing session work today. My husband will be there. His name is Jim. He'd be more than happy to sign you up. One of the other things that I do offer is if you're looking for a new career and would be interested in being a medical intuitive energy medicine practitioner or intuitive counselor, I offer a medical intuition and energy medicine training program. It's distance learning. You basically get the information, you work on it at home. One of the things about this package is that it's kind of like training in a box. Basically, you buy the training, and it comes with all the books, tapes, CDs. In the second module, there's a crystal healing course, so you get a set of crystals as part of the course. I mean, so basically you pay for postage, paper. It's nominal charge on your end. And so right now I'm running a special on that, so you can come by the booth if you're interested in that, and there's flyers and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so they're going to kick me off the stage here in a second, so thank you very much for coming. I look forward to seeing you in my booth. Just look for my big head.